am going to go ahead and get started here in just another minute. Let me stop my share here. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. I see that there are still some folks logging in. Now that we're a few minutes past the hour though, I think we can go ahead and get started. So let me just make sure this is all going here. Okay. Well, without further ado, I say let's go ahead and get started. Just a warm welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this first event in our Data Plus Diversity series. My name is Renee McLeod, and I am a senior manager here at Tableau on the marketing team, and I'm absolutely honored to be here with you today for this conversation. So I will be moderating today's discussion panel with the Tableau community members, Chantilly, Jaggernauth, Jasent Walker and Sekou Tyler. But before our panel, I'm personally super excited, and we all are excited to have an inspiring special guest joining us today for a fireside chat with Chantilly, Kimberly Bryant, founder and CEO of Black Girls Code. Before I hand things off to Chantilly and Kimberly, though, I wanted to talk just a little bit about what brings us all together today, including the Data Plus Diversity series. And then also, we're really excited to be talking about the launch of our Racial Justice Data Initiative. But I wanted to take a moment and just talk a little bit about why we are here. Like, what is this moment? So when the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery ignited a new wave of activism and demand for social justice, we heard from you, the Tableau community, asking for more resources and support, talking about how can we be taking action. And so in the Tableau community, I think that a lot of you are very familiar with this, but we say together, we are extraordinary. And at Tableau, I can say that we actually truly believe that, and we know that you do too. And the we in that statement has to be inclusive. It has to be representative of all of our community members, regardless of their race, their age, economic status, their gender, their ability, their sexual orientation. And we cannot, and I acknowledge this, we cannot overturn centuries of oppression in a single day, in a single conversation, but we do have a tremendous privilege and an ability to create change. So we've developed this Data Plus Diversity series to help address important topics like existing challenges and solutions to diversity in data. And I think that we've had conversations about this before, but data is a powerful tool to reveal insights, initiate conversation, ignite change, and we think that it can bring much needed accountability to diversity efforts. And this is meant to be a platform for all of us. So we're partnering with community members to highlight voices and address actionable ways, I'm just going to sit with that word, actionable ways that we can use data for greater inclusion and provide much needed inspiration. And throughout the series, we hope to foster brave conversations around diversity, inclusion, allyship, and actions we can take to affect positive change. So I sat with that action point for a minute there. And you know, in addition to this new event series, which we're all very excited about, in July, we announced the launch of our Racial Justice Data Initiative, including a new 3-year, $10 million expansion of the Tableau Foundation's equity work. So what this means is we hope to partner with and empower local change makers to use data directly to address the prejudice, violence, and structural inequities facing Black communities across the country. And as a part of this initiative, we also announced the formation of our Community Equity Task Force. Our goal is to improve representation for all diverse groups across our community and create an inclusive space for all to participate. And the task force will meet monthly to discuss progress and strategies for improving representation and inclusion, driving the Tableau community's commitment to justice, equality, and being a place where all are welcome to explore data together as a data fam, right? Like, how are we going to create that space? And these are just some of the steps that we're taking to do that. So again, my thanks to all of you for showing up today and for being a part of the conversation and the change. In today's event, we hope to focus the conversation on how to use data and analytics for greater inclusion in our work, like building more inclusive and equitable data sets and dashboards, but in our personal lives as well. So next up, we have a really fantastic fireside chat with two brilliant women that I am thrilled will be sharing with us today. We have Chantilly, who will be moderating with our honored guest speaker, Kimberly Bryant, founder and CEO of Black Girls Code. So please welcome the brilliant Vice President of Data Visualization and Training at Lovelytics, Tableau Zen Master, and founder and CEO of the nonprofit Millennials in Data, Chantilly Jaggernauth. Hi, Chantilly. Hi, Kimberly. Welcome.
So much, Renee. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Renee, for that warm introduction. And thank you, Tableau, for inviting me to moderate today's fireside chat and to participate in the discussion panel that will happen after this. Thank you to you all, all of the attendees, for taking the time to join us and participate in the first of many important discussions about how to use data and analytics for greater diversity and inclusion. Now, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's going to take the participation and the support of you all within the community to create a more equitable future for all. If you're interested in participating in future sessions, please fill out the form that we'll be sharing at the end of today's event. Alrighty, so for those of you who don't know me, I am Chantilly Jaggernauth. As Renee mentioned, I'm currently a Tableau Zen Master and member of the Tableau community. She also mentioned the nonprofit organization that I started and currently run as the CEO of Millennials in Data. I started MAD with the mission to bridge the data literacy and analytical skills gap by training and mentoring millennials. Our mission is to prepare these students and graduates to enter data-driven environments and become leaders, regardless of the industry that they enter. And I'm happy to say that we've been running this organization for about 2 years now, and we're in our fourth cohort as of today. I was partially inspired to start Millennials in Data by the special guest joining us today. I have the great privilege of speaking with this inspiration to many, who is also a personal hero of mine, Kimberly Bryant, founder and CEO of Black Girls Code. Black Girls Code is a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the face of technology by introducing girls of color to the field of technology and computer science, concentrating on entrepreneurial concepts to help them navigate and succeed in a professional environment. Since 2011, Black Girls Code has grown from a local grassroots initiative in the Bay Area to an international organization with 14 chapters across the United States and in Johannesburg, South Africa. BCG has reached over 10,000 students to date and continues to grow and thrive. We'll talk more about Black Girls Code in a few minutes, but there is so much more that I want to say about Kimberly first. A leader and a trailblazer in nearly every effort she undertakes, Kimberly was awarded the prestigious Jefferson Award for Community Service for her work to support Bay Area communities. She was on the Business Insider list of the 25 most influential African Americans in technology, was named on the Ebony Power 100 list in 2013, and was one of Fast Company's most creative people. Kimberly was also named a White House Champion of Change for her work in tech inclusion and for her focus on bridging the digital divide for girls of color. While these are only a few of the many accolades Kimberly has earned, she has been breaking barriers for much longer than that. Kimberly has spent over 20 successful years in the biotech and pharmaceutical industries, holding various leadership roles for Fortune 50 companies like Merck, Pfizer, Genentech, among others. Having spoken on the topic of tech inclusion at various conferences worldwide, like the Personal Democracy Forum, TEDx Kansas City, Big Ideas Festival, South by Southwest, among others, she's especially knowledgeable about the topic of today's event. Please welcome Kimberly Bryant, founder and CEO of Black Girls Code. Welcome, Kimberly.
Good morning, Chantilly. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I so appreciate that. I'm happy to be in space with you this morning.
Thank you. And thank you for joining me in the Tableau community today. We're honored to have you as our guest speaker for this inaugural event in our Data Plus Diversity event series. So please tell us more about Black Girls Code. What is the mission of the organization?
So Black Girls Code, as you mentioned, is we were a grassroots nonprofit organization that was founded here in the San Francisco Bay Area back in 2011. But our focus is really simple. It's to what we call change the face of technology. And we really set out to do that by introducing girls from underrepresented communities to coding, technology, and as early as we possibly could. So starting at age 6 or 7 and really engaging them and exposing them to the tech industry and getting them involved and staying involved so that they can one day move into those roles as leaders and innovators in the industry.
Awesome. Now, within your mission, I've done my research on your organization. You are working to tackle this concept of the digital divide. Now, there are members in our audience who may not know about the digital divide. Can you speak a little bit more about, what that is and how you all are tackling that?
Of course. So I would say I would start from really kind of speaking a little bit about numbers and data, if you will, since this is the data fam. I think you all can appreciate that perspective. But when I started this organization, I was tackling some issues that I saw from a data perspective. I received my degree in electrical engineering with a minor in CS at the end of the 80s. And at that time, it was interesting enough that there was a peak number, if you will, of women that were receiving bachelor's degrees in CS. So at that time, approximately 30% or so of the bachelor's degrees in CS went to women. Less, of course, to women of color, but 30% went to women. Back in 2010 and 2011, when I was really exploring ways to get my daughter Kai interested in coding and get her involved in technology, that number had really changed drastically. So currently, there's probably about 12%, 14% of women receive bachelor's degrees in computer science, and less than 3% of those go to African American women, Black women. Even though we see that Black men or men of color are receiving maybe about 12 to 14%, maybe 18, depending on the survey, the number for Black women and women of color, if you look at Native American women, it's even less. Women from Latinx communities, it's even less. That is what this organization was really addressing. And the way that it really gets to the root of the question about the digital divide is that if we are not gaining access to these tools of technology as creators, we often find ourselves left out of the conversation as consumers. We don't have a say, we don't have a hand in those things that are being created. And the digital divide that exists in many of our communities and under-resourced communities around the world. I see people on the feed from Brazil to Ireland, everywhere. You see this issue proliferate, no matter if you're here in the US or other places, that access to the technology tools is getting wider and wider. There's less access to broadband and there's less access to the tools that help us to create with technology as a tool. So really for us, it's about feeding this pipeline, if you will, of technical creators who both understand and are comfortable and can wield this technology tool as a source for change.
Awesome, awesome. And speaking of numbers, right, and growth and success that your organization has had, you've mentioned previously to myself that you all are coming up on your 10-year anniversary. You all have had tremendous success and you continue to grow and impact globally. When you first founded the nonprofit, did you
create community for my daughter, and so that she could really engage in learning these skill sets in a community that was representative of her, that included other women and women of color that looked like her, shared those experiences. I really thought, we would do it for a few weekends and then we would move on, or she would move on. The girls wouldn't be interested anymore. And I never imagined that I would see this organization grow to the level that it has.
Awesome. And I can say, speaking from personal experience, I have a lot of friends who actually volunteer with your organization. So I definitely appreciate the work that you are out here doing. And I wish you the best and continuing to grow your organization.
Thank you.
Now I'll flip the script a little bit and dive a little bit more into the data side of things. In partnership with the authors of the book, The Confidence Code for Girls from 2018, there was a survey conducted by YPulse, a polling firm that focuses on tweens and teens. They found that between the ages of 8 and 14, girls' confidence levels fall by 30%. This survey also found that 3 and 14 girls worry about failing. Between ages 12 and 13, the percentage of girls who say they're not allowed to fail increases by 150%. I'll say that one more time. The percentage of girls who say they're not allowed to fail increases by 150%. Now, I bring up these numbers because Black Girls Code doesn't just train girls with programming and game design skills, but also leadership skills and confidence. Can you speak more to the ways that Black Girls Code creates paradigm shifts for its participants, and how do these shifts ripple out to the families and the communities in which these girls live?
That's a great question. And I kind of smiled a little because I was in a conversation with one of my team members earlier this week, and we had a very robust conversation around this concept of self-confidence and self-efficacy. So the conversation was really around, what do we teach our students? What's important as we go into this big event that we're doing this couple of months from now in the fall. And we were talking about all the technical things that they were going to have access to. And I was like, that's great. And, we certainly need to teach those coding skills, but bringing in that community aspect that allows them to create self-confidence and self-efficacy is as important, if not more important, than teaching them the literal techniques to ideation and writing code to build their website or build an application. It's the core of what makes BGC unique. And I think that has been shown to be true in the success of girls that have come through our program. We definitely give them a firm foundation and a platform of coding and web design, be that in robotics or game development, etc. But more so than that, what we do is allow them to see themselves as fully capable of being women who are not just consumers of technology, but the creators and leaders and innovators. And I think that's a transformative change for many of the girls. So students within our program are coming from multiple backgrounds. They're coming from different communities all over the US, even the world. We have a chapter in Joburg, and they're coming from different socioeconomic status. But one of the things that they share in that community is that they're coming in as women of color. And I think that is important. So that's rooted in the work that Renee talked about before around social justice, and maybe more so than social justice, social equity. Because Black women and women of color in society in general are often marginalized. They are often criminalized. And this has an impact on how we see ourselves in the workplace. It has an effect on how young women see themselves in the world and how they hold space. So a key part of BGC is creating this safe space, if you will, as Bell Hooks calls it, safe space so that girls can come into a community where they're not only elevated, but they're celebrated. And that has an effect on building that self-confidence and self-efficacy, which is so vitally important for whatever they do, whether they go into a field of technology or others. So we really set them up for success, if you will. And that doesn't often happen for women, nevertheless, women of color in any space that we tend to occupy.
That's absolutely true. And I definitely think that the community aspect that you touched on is super important, and joining a community with like individuals who look like yourself, with a leader who looks like yourself. I definitely think it's super important to be able to self-identify with others in your community, especially your leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about this often in terms of even BGC and how we've grown, certainly over the last year. But we're not all women at BGC in terms of our staff, but we certainly are majority women. So that's just how it is. And like, we have a majority organization that is led by women. And many of us, I think, also majority women of color. But just as women and being able to run an organization that is really being unapologetic about the work that we're doing, you see something different that happens as far as the dynamics in that space when you let women lead. And I remember an example years ago when my daughter was in middle school, and she was on her a team. She was on a robotics team, first robotics team, and she was at an all-girl middle school here in the Bay Area. And I was, for whatever reason, asked to be a coach for the team. And I came over one afternoon from my job down in the Bay Area here, South Bay, at a big, I don't want to say the name, big biotech company. And I came over after work to coach this team at my daughter's middle school. And I was really in awe as I sat and observed how these young women worked in collaboration with each other, because it was such a stark difference than the environment that I had literally just left 30 minutes ago. They were pulling each other into the work in ways and elevating each other, giving each other the support. I didn't feel that I got that same type of support from my peers as an engineer in my office. And I was blown away by their ability to do that so naturally. And I think that's the uniqueness of bringing women to the table as leaders, because we often lead in ways that are different than our male peers. And I think that's why diversity is so vitally important. And it's important for whatever we do, from technology to data analytics to politics. It's important to bring others in, because we get a better solution to whatever it is we're trying to solve.
Awesome. And I want to continue the conversation around creating spaces for success. In 2019, during one of your TED Talks, you mentioned that the risks of failure are not equally distributed. You asked, how can we give Black women and girls the spaces to fail, but also the permission to fail and get back up and try again, which I personally think is very important. What can people do as individuals to create spaces where they have the freedom and the permission to fail?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I think it goes back again to that concept of safe space. An interesting story is that when I wrote that TEDx talk last year, I initially thought I was writing that speech to my daughter. If you listen to that speech, I say at the end, this is a love letter to my daughter. But I also recognized in the course of going through that process that it was actually a love letter to myself, because during that time last year, I was really going through a storm in my work and in the work that I was doing and my work as a leader, and it was difficult. And I felt that those that were empowered and often had the responsibility to be my support system in that work, they were absent. You know, they weren't there. So I was struggling to learn some new things. I was struggling to deal with those issues that I know were development issues for myself as a leader. And I was making a lot of mistakes. And I did not feel that I had the support from my team, my squad, if you will, that were the ones that are supposed to push me on, guide me, to say, hey, it's okay. You know, you failed here, but I believe in you. I believe in your capability to shift the narrative, to shift the path of the ship. And I think that is what's important. And this speech, if you recall, I talk about my experience in taking one of the hardest classes I ever had to take as an engineer in electrical engineering, and failing horribly on this final exam after, you know, excelling all year in the class, and being devastated, and having my actual TA come to me and say, no, this test, this one failure is not a definition of who you are and what you're capable of doing. I believe in you, and allowing me to shift direction and change the course. And so again, I think it's all about creating a space in which you allow the person to flourish, and elevating those things that are those positive attributes that are inherent to who they are and what they bring to the table, and not necessarily highlighting those areas where they need to grow in the same way, like leaning in to their strengths and really giving them permission to take a chance and fail, which is something that as women, we don't want to do. We want to be perfect a lot of the times because we know we don't often get a second chance.
Awesome. You briefly touched on when you studied electrical engineering at Vanderbilt University, and during your TED Talk, you spoke about how you failed that exam. Can you describe to us what being a woman, a Black woman, was like in your department when you were in school, and were there other women or women of color in your program? Did you have any mentors or a support system that really helped you out?
I did. I think when you and I first met, I told you how impressed I was with you and the organization that you started in a field that does not have many women and certainly doesn't have many women of color. I think the work that you're doing is so important, because one of the things that's important to women, especially when we're in male-dominated fields, where we find ourselves the only one, is to have those role models and mentors that can show us the pathway, if you will, and allow us to see ourselves in their shoes, if you will. For me at Vanderbilt, it was a struggle, because when I started in the mid 80s, there were probably only about 35 Black students in my freshman class, out of a class of about 700, 800 students. And when we look at and break that down into which percentage of those of us were in the School of Engineering, that was even less. I would say 8, maybe 10 of us were in the School of Engineering. And that meant that I did not see myself in any classes. I did not have any other students of color in most of my classes as a freshman through the time that I graduated. I never had a woman as a professor. I certainly never had a Black professor in the School of Engineering. So it was lucky for me, if you will, that one of my closest friends, who was an upperclassman in electrical engineering, I met walking literally down the quad, and just bumped into her, had a conversation with her, found out that she was also an electrical engineer, and I bonded with her immediately as someone that I looked up to both then and still today as a professor in electrical engineering. And that was pivotal for me, because electrical engineering is hard. I mean, engineering was hard. There were times that I wanted to say, I'm just gonna pack up and go home. Like, this is difficult. Even as a student that came in, with very high marks and achievements from high school, it was a difficult journey. And so finding that role model and mentor and my friend it was pivotal to those moments when I wanted to give up and throw in the towel. I also found an organization on campus called National Society of Black Engineers, where I could then have a even larger community of support of other Black engineers that were in the space. And even with that, at times, it still wasn't enough. I'm still in contact with a lot of my Vandy alum, and we did a lot of activism work on campus during the 80s. And one of the things that we did was really advocate for the administration to bring in an engineer and advisor for Black students. And that advisor that we advocated and lobbied the administration for in my freshman year created a difference for generations after I left the university. There's students that are much younger than me that were able to benefit from having someone on the administration who was in their corner and could support their journeys. So this concept of really having someone there as a role model, a mentor, a support for you as a woman or a person of color in these spaces is critical, not even just to success, but just to our survival.
Definitely, and I smiled while you were speaking, because you mentioned NSBE, and a little background about myself. Before Howard University, I went to a engineering high school, so A.R. Johnson Health Science and Engineering High School in Augusta, Georgia. And Augusta is a very small community, right? A lot of individuals who are raised in Augusta end up not leaving Augusta, or they go work in the military. And I can personally say that while I was in high school, I did have an engineering mentor who introduced me to NSBE, and it was so impactful to be able to go to the competitions and go to the conferences and just see so many other Black individuals who were also studying and trying to become engineers as well. And I could say that when I look back at it now, it definitely had an impact on my journey. And I can point out during pivotal times of my life where I've had a Black woman as a mentor that took me under her wing and guided me and showed me the ropes. And I can say that that truly has enabled my success throughout my career.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. So I want to pivot just a little bit. 2020 has definitely been a difficult year for all of us. I don't know about you all, but I'm a little sick of being home. I think we could do some good news right now. Can you share some of your favorite student success stories?
I have a few. So one of my student success stories is actually really about one of my mentees. One of my mentees, her name is Brianna. I met her back, I want to say I want to say it was like 2013 or something. And she was actually, she had just graduated. So she was a high school senior, and she had just graduated and was on her way to Spelman to major in medicine. And I met her because, as you know, like many high schools require, or maybe it's for college, I don't remember which side of it was on, but she had to do some volunteer work to graduate and finish up her work. And she decided to found Black Girls Code, decided to come in as a volunteer, not technical volunteer. She was just maybe like registering students, and came to a workshop in Atlanta and was able to see just during the breaks, these little, 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old girls that were in these classrooms and learning about coding, which was something, she wasn't familiar with at the time. And, a light bulb went out for her. And she asked if she could come back the next workshop. She was supposed to just do one. And you know how high school students like, okay, I'm gonna just get this one and done. But something happened in that classroom, and a light bulb went off for her, and she asked to come back again. And she came back as a technical volunteer. And then she started to really see that in that summer, that coding was something that she was actually interested in. And she ended up starting in a few months at Spelman and changing her major from pre-med. I'm sorry, now I could love to see her as doctors. We need more Black doctors and women doctors as well. But she changed her major from pre-med to computer science, and went on to do some great things, like being on the board of Anita Borg organization as a student, really doing things, traveling all over the world. She worked for Megan Smith and the Barack Obama administration and their Office of Science and Technology. She was just a superstar. And I tell that story because I think it's important to share how we as women can mentor each other and become role models and inspirations for each other cross generations. You know, she was looking at younger students as a young woman. She was looking at girls, and those girls inspired her to see something of herself in them that really changed her career path significantly. And that's something that I really cherish to this day as one of her mentors. Is the success and growth that I've seen within her. But there are many stories like that. We have students that started with the organization when they were 11 and 12, receiving full scholarships all over the US, to Howard University, to USC. I have a student there that started when she was about 10 years old. She's on a full scholarship at USC, worked with EA over the summer. My own daughter is now moving, she's in her junior year and majoring in computer science out at University of Maryland. So we have multiple success stories of girls that are not only coming through the organization and finding their path in these various technologies, but going on to now start create things of their own, which is really, I think, is the beauty of the work that we've been able to do.
Awesome. I love to hear about Black excellence. I could listen to it all day. Seriously. I know we're coming up on time, and I definitely want to leave a few minutes for our audience question. You've done a lot of great and amazing work over the course of your career, and I can imagine that you're going to continue to do this work and continue to uplift minority groups. What are some tips? All right, so final question: what are some tips for others to be able to do the same?
One thing that I was saying this to someone recently, and I don't remember who it was. I think I was talking about my journey. I think I was giving an interview recently, and I was talking about my journey. And as you mentioned in the opening, or maybe Renee did, no, this is coming on 10 years for us. We'll be 10 years old next February. And that was a hard 10 years. I'm not gonna lie. Like, that 10 years was difficult for us as an organization because we didn't have a lot of support. And I was reflecting on that after the news. We were talking about this $3 million grant that we received from Mackenzie Bezos over the summer. And I was reflecting that I was like, well, yeah, it's taking us 10 years to be an overnight success. And what this $3 million gift meant to us, and what it meant in that conversation I was sharing, is that for the first time in 10 years, since maybe the beginning, I have room to dream, right? I have room to dream about where BGC can go, what BGC can do. And I haven't had that in 10 years because I was just trying to survive a lot of the time. And how nice it would have been if I had always had years to dream, these 10 years. But that being said, I would say I would not change that, right? So I think it's important that as leaders, as innovators, or anyone who has a passion, I think it's important to take that first step, right? To take that risk, to lean into the thing that makes you get up every day in the morning, or the thing that you're most passionate about, even if you don't have all the pieces in place or all the support that you believe that you need to do the work. Because oftentimes it's not just about the end result, right? It's about the journey. And I'm touched by the fact that you mentioned to me that you have been, known about me and my work and how it has inspired you to create the work that you do at your own nonprofit. That's what it's about, right? Because we never know, like, who else is looking at us. And it's the ripple effect of these little droplets that we're putting out into the universe that expand well beyond where we are even able to see in a moment. So I think the encouragement that I would give was to lean into the work, lean into those things that you're passionate about, and absolutely find your tribe, right? Find that support system, because you were not a superhero. I'm not a superhero. A friend of mine wrote a fantastic book about, it's not just about the being the only one, right? It's not about just leaning into this onlyness. It's about finding those other lights in our path that can join our path, our work, and our journey to make it happen, and not really owning this singular vision of being the only one as our guiding star. And I think when she wrote this book, Onlyness, that's Nilofer Merchant, it really enlightened me she interviewed me for the book, and I was like, well, yeah, I've been exceptional, to your point about Black excellence. I've been exceptional and yada, yada, yada. And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, what do you mean? And then through really, I think, digesting her work, I realized that it's not just about me being the only one. It's about, how I can enlist others through the work that I do. Because I think we really move the earth, if you will, when we are aligned together for a greater cause.
Awesome. From that, I would say, find your passion and live in your purpose. I say my 3 successes to life are to learn, build, and influence. Right? I feel like I'm not successful if I'm not doing each of those things: learning something, building something to show for it, and then influencing others on how they can do the same as well. So I definitely appreciate that.
Well, I would say to you, Chantilly, is that you're already doing that just by being here. Like, you don't have to do anything, because the moment I met you, I was impressed. Like, and so when you were telling me about your work during our course of our conversation, I was like, oh yeah, I've already been writing your name down in your organization over here on my pad, because there's something that you had that it resonated with me right from the beginning. And just to then to learn more about the things that you were doing through your work and your passion, that made me even more excited about, look at this young woman, like, she's phenomenal. And so I would say to you is don't carry the load all on your shoulder, because all you have to do, you just have to be. You just gotta walk, you just gotta be. Because that what you were done for your purpose here is really touching folks like me, just like I touched you, you touched me, you didn't even know it. You didn't have to give me the accolades because I saw something, and I knew that was something that I wanted. I was attracted to and drawn to, and I wanted to support. And being able to lean into that and just walk your walk, not worry about, those things that, may need to be those extraneous pieces. I think that's often enough.
I like that. Just be. You have to brand that. Just be. You might see me tweet that a couple of times. I truly appreciate that. Before we wrap, I do want to take a question from the audience here. I have 2, and I've hand selected one. This is from Angela. Kimberly, do you have inspiration to share for rural areas to encourage adoption of technology to help underserved and underrepresented populations? Recently, I heard someone in our small community say, but there are hardly any Black people here, and my data says otherwise. I want to use our clinical data to help encourage representation. I chose this question because, as I mentioned earlier, I came from a small community as well. I was raised in Augusta, Georgia, very small. There are a lot of Black people there, but there weren't a lot of Black people in technology and in STEM fields. So I'll go ahead and open this question up to you.
Well, how would you answer it, Chantilly? Because I think your perspective, I'm like, how would you answer that? Because your perspective and I think your lived experience is important here. So I mean, what's your thoughts on how they could really drive this movement forward in that small community?
I always say to show up, right? So when I was, in these rural communities, what really inspired an individual like myself was, having a mentor, someone that I saw who ventured beyond the community and then came back to give to the community. So I would say use the gift that you have to inspire and, invoke change within the community and within these rural communities. You'll be surprised the long-term impact that you would have.
I love that. I think I would say yes, and collective impact is real. So finding ways to partner. What's the largest town nearby? Is there an organization doing similar work in that larger town that you can pull into the work in your town? How can you reach out to national organizations like BGC, NSBE, et cetera, millennials and data? How can you reach out to these larger organizations working on a national scale and do some work in your town, in your city? Because I think numbers don't lie. So pulling in folks that can help you do the work and start to show how the impact is needed in your community, it speaks volumes.
Awesome. Well, I know we're at time, Kimberly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful fireside chat.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I am so very grateful for you again, Chantilly, and the work that you and young people like yourself are doing. And I believe in y'all. Keep going.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All righty, Renee, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And thank you both so much. That I'm struggling with words right now. My heart is full. I really appreciate everything that you just shared. And in particular, what you, when you were talking about not leaning in on being the only and kind of coming together to the greater cause, and this idea of kind of lifting each other up, I just, that resonated a great deal, and just thank you so much for sharing. I'm feeling pretty inspired, so thank you. And I would, sorry, I'm having some emotions right now. That was really fantastic. I think now we can, Chantilly, I know that you're gonna kind of put on your panel hat and move over to join a continued conversation where we will be joined by a couple of folks from our community that I would like to introduce. We have Sekou Tyler, a self-proclaimed data geek, computer aficionado, who combines the scientific elements of data analysis with narrative properties of data visualization, and his degrees and extensive certifications have allowed him to use his version of data storytelling in multiple industries. And then we also have, I'm happy to say, Jasent MBA, senior consultant at Capgemini, where she focuses on data analytics, business intelligence, and is a Tableau trainer for the Millennials and Data Training Program. And then, of course, Chantilly, who we met a little bit earlier during our incredible discussion with Kimberly. So I'm going to be asking these data rock stars about data and diversity, including ways to design equitable and inclusive data sets, dashboards, and cultures. So maybe to get started, if we can talk a little bit about your origin stories, right? Like when you, can you talk a little bit about when you started working with data, and when did you see yourself, first see yourself as an analyst? Maybe Chantilly, can you kick us off with that?
Definitely. My story is a little unique. I actually began working with data back when I was a student at Howard University about 10 years ago. It was during one of my classes that professor gave us a massive data set on movie ratings and simply just said, like, make sense of it, present something to the class, analyze this data, right? And at that point in my college journey, the only data tool that I knew or was familiar with was Excel, right? But the trick with this data set was that it was just way too large to open up in Excel. Now, they hadn't taught us anything else. They didn't give us any other direction. And the assignment was due the next day, and I hadn't done it yet. And I simply just couldn't figure out like how to analyze this data set and present something to the class. So I turned to my best friend, Google, and I typed in softwares that can analyze data for free. As I was a student, and lo and behold, Tableau was the first ad that appeared, right? As a student, you can get a free license with Tableau for years, as long as you use your student email address. And naturally, I have an inquisitive mind, so I was able to knock out my assignment just by watching one tutorial. And today, when I give a presentation on my journey, I always show individuals exactly like where I came from, right? I wasn't always like this great designer in Tableau, but I always start with like where I came from, because my charts were very basic, right? They were the typical Tableau blue. During the presentation, I didn't even take off the generic sheet 1 or sheet 4 name at the top. But I was just so inspired. Like, I finally found this tool that could help me analyze data. And from there, because it was so simple, I just started researching and learning more about like, what is data? Like, what is data analytics? And I would say like, this is a love story that began at that point. And that's really when I decided I wanted to become a data analyst. I mean, it helped that the salary was pretty good at the time, you know, for individuals who could help organizations make sense of data. I said, all right, I can do that. I love math. I love numbers. I love solving problems, answering questions, and I can answer questions using data, numbers, and things like that. So in addition to my studies at school, I continue to teach myself. So I'm self-taught. I continue to teach myself Tableau. And in the process of learning Tableau, I learned about other tools that other analysts should be using as well, like SQL. So I learned about, you know, databases and stuff. I learned about Alteryx. I learned Python. I learned R. I just learned all of these tools that I needed in my tool belt just by research on the internet. And since then, I've still been in love with data.
I love that. As I'm sure you could have tell from our conversations, like I appreciate the emotional connection to the data and being able to kind of create this space. So that's right on. Jasent, what about you? Can you share a little bit about your start? Oh, and Jasent, you're on.
Oh,
There you
sorry.
go. No
Yes.
worries.
So I've actually always worked with data in a sense. In undergrad, I majored in clinical laboratory science, it's basically the study of like blood and body fluids, and you analyze their chemical makeup and you help doctors like, you know, diagnose patients, right? And so there's a lot of data and chemical analysis and statistical analysis that goes into getting those results. And so I was doing that for a number of years, and then I decided I wanted to transition into management. So I went back to school to get my MBA, which is where I met Chantilly. And she had brought her Millennials in Data program to Howard University, the school I was attending. And I joined her program, and she introduced me to Tableau, and I've been doing data analytics ever since then.
Fantastic. And Sekou?
Yeah, so I got my start actually on the IT help desk. So I started my career on the help desk at the very bottom, then eventually got a promotion to be a process analyst. So I was responsible for looking at IT support ticket information, similar to Chantilly, looking at it via Excel. So started, you know, really the analytical mindset with Excel. It eventually started learning SQL, and it made that a focal point of my career. I realized, you know, being able to create stuff in SQL and writing queries made my life much easier. So let me focus on this. And then from there, it's just a natural progression within my career, and I moved up and moved into data analytics and storytelling. Started working, I was more client-facing, customer-facing, so I was constantly having to create a story with the data set that I had. So I started out in PowerPoint, and then I learned about all these various tools out there, and I was like, whoa, let me automate some of this stuff, because again, I'm all about efficiency. I want to make this stuff easier as possible. So I learned about all these different tools, and ever since then, I've just fell in love with data analytics and storytelling, and it is a pure passion of mine that I continue to work on and continue to strive to be the best at.
Awesome. And as you're sharing this, and Jasent, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. You know, when you think back about the opportunities that either you're presented or you created for yourself, like, is there what are examples or an experience that kind of helped you succeed professionally, like thinking about that progression?
Yeah, so as far as opportunities that have been presented, I mean, I really have to thank Chantilly for so many of them. And I cannot like overstress the benefits of having a mentor, right? So she has so many connections within the Tableau community. It's insane. And so I was able, even while I was in school and in her cohort, I was able to work on consulting projects with her nonprofit. And then post-graduation, she introduced me to the world of training. So, you know, I've partnered with a lot of companies who need training and even training companies who need trainers. So you know, I cannot overstate the value of having a good mentor and, you know, having connections and networking. And as far as opportunities that I've created for myself, I think it's, you just have to like look around in your organization. Even when while I was getting my MBA, I was still working full time in the hospital, right? And so as I'm learning Tableau, I'm looking around, and in the lab, they were doing inventory using spreadsheets, right? So they had one for when they'd get a shipment, they'd log it in and they'd create the inventory sheet for that. And then if you use it for an instrument, they would have a sheet for that. And then if they had expired reagents, they'd have a sheet for that. If they loaned any to the other departments or sister hospitals, they'll have a sheet for that. So like, it was very time consuming. It was a very slow process. And me being like, oh my God, I know Tableau. I'm like, I think, you know, there's a better way to do this. And so, you know, they were able to like, you say, yeah, you can look at this data, anything to help the situation. And, you know, a lot of people, they just don't know the extent of analytics, and they don't see the you know, it's not just data analytics, it's also seeing patterns and things like that. So being able to see those opportunities for yourself and kind of insert yourself and show where you can add value, I think that's kind of how you would create your own opportunities and expand your knowledge base and kind of expand your opportunity pools. You know, everything might not always be paid. Like the inventory stuff I was doing, you know, there was just additional, and I'm in no way advocating always working for free, but but you know, these opportunities, they lead to more and better opportunities down the line. So, you know, it's always, you should always be on the lookout for things like that, like where you can add value and where you can help.
Awesome. And then
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, and I have to piggyback off that. Major, you know, shout out to Chantilly for being a great mentor. In 2018, I challenged myself to do more public speaking on data topics, and this is when I got involved in the Tableau public community. I went out there, I was like, all right, who's somebody that looks like me, who can I connect with? And I reached out to Chantilly, set up a quick call, and she was very nice, like she is all the time. So, you know, just that vote of confidence, be like, hey, you can do this, help me out a lot. And ever since then, there's been several opportunities that have been presented, with today being one of them, right? This is a big opportunity to come and speak about these particular topics that are going on. And then posting public data visualizations and doing more speaking has caused me to connect with more people. And so therefore I'm connecting with more people, and more opportunities are starting to come up. Recently, I have an opportunity to teach data analytics and visualization at a minority-owned school called Pivot Technology here in Nashville. And our focus is we want to get more minority people of color into data analytics and into these positions that are open. So our main goal is to just make sure that we're filling those gaps that are there. I like to say that my wife is amazed at my juggling skills because I'm constantly doing a lot of things at once. And then from a professional standpoint, doing a lot of this public speaking has helped me now because I'm talking to crowds. I have no idea who's in the crowd, but when I'm hosting a meeting, I'm more comfortable with an executive level audience, and it's not as scary as it used to be. So this has helped me out professionally and personally.
Awesome. And Chantilly, is there anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I definitely think that Jasent and Sekou hit on, you know, what I think in terms of opportunities. I say professionally, there are two things that have helped me succeed. The first is just challenging myself, right? I believe that true growth can only be achieved when you're challenged and you're faced with something new that's just outside of your norm. So typically, I seek out things that allow me to grow and teach me something new in the long term. So you saw when I was a student, I sought out learning more about Tableau. I just didn't do my assignment and push the tool to the side. I was inquisitive. I wanted to learn more about it. And the reason that I say things and not just, referring to jobs or stuff is because I like to challenge myself. Like every year I task myself with learning something new, right? It could be something that's, in the field that I'm in. It could be like a new tool. This year I've tasked myself with learning about investments and trading. Like it was something that I always wanted to learn more about. So I literally have read probably like 12 books like in the past couple of weeks, right? And I hate reading, so that just says a lot. And then I'll say the second thing is that you got to seek out mentors, right? And I'm very selective with my mentors. As Jasent mentioned, I helped mentor her on her journey. I thought of it more as a friendship, but it's good to know that she thinks of me more as a mentor as well. And the same thing with Sekou. I try to find individuals who have succeeded in their respective fields and who resemble me in a sense, right? A Black woman, a young woman, and just a woman in general. I don't have a ton of mentors, but I can say the ones that I do have, I truly cherish the relationship that we have, and I'm appreciative of the guidance that they've been able to provide me over the years.
It's really interesting as I hear the three of you share your experiences and kind of especially around mentorship and opportunity, the continuing thread of this idea of, challenging yourself, but also showing up for each other, like being a mentor, seeking a mentor, having these conversations and creating community, and like even extended to what we're doing right now, I think is incredibly powerful. So I really appreciate your perspectives and sharing. I wanted to get up into the data a little bit and talk about very specifically talking about diversity data. And so I was hoping, have any of you worked with diversity data before? If you have, what are some things that people need to consider?
I actually want to touch on this one. I could start this one off.
Please.
So prior to joining Lovelytics, I was an HR analyst at Comcast. It was a role that intrigued me because prior to Comcast, I really didn't have any HR experience. In the long run, I learned so much from the role and the ways that companies should and should not use diversity data. So in working with the diversity data, first and foremost, I think that people should pay close attention to obviously the confidentiality associated with this data and making sure that what you're doing is creating a positive impact and not a negative one. So be very cautious with this data, right? Second, I think organizations should understand that diversity data contains many components, right? I noticed that a lot of organizations simply aggregate their numbers and determine whether or not they meet a particular benchmark, right? An example is when an organization says, we are 60% diverse. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what is your gender breakout? What is your people of color breakout? Like, take it a step further, right? What is your people of color non-Asian breakout, especially when we're thinking about like tech roles, right? They tend to group Asians within the POC bucket, and it kind of inflates the number. So what's your POC NA? We call it POC NA. What's that breakout? And even answering those types of questions are still at a high level, right? You can dive deeper into that data. What's the breakout of your diversity in regards to job levels? What does your executive look like? And does that executive team reflect that overall 60% diverse metric that you claimed, that I claimed in the example? What about turnover, job satisfaction and promotions, learning and development? I say all of that to say that when working with diversity data, people in organizations should not just look at the high level aggregated number, just to paint a picture, paint a pretty picture, but instead should just dive into the details and truly seek out areas for improvement.
Awesome.
So one thing I want to add, I just want to jump into the back of what Chantilly was saying. When I've seen a lot of diversity and inclusion data, and then it'll just be, you know, like you said, the number of like diversity, whether it's a count or a percentage. But I do want to stress that diversity and inclusion are two very different things. And oftentimes, you know, organizations are just lumping them together. But you know, your diversity, it's more quantitative. It's your count of, you know, these people and these different groups, these different communities, and having the physical presence of those individuals, right? But your inclusion is the extent to which your employees feel valued, like they can contribute, like that they're respected and accepted at your organization. So, you know, if you have a diverse makeup, but you're lacking inclusivity, you know, you're not really getting the benefits, and you're not really, you know, you're not truly like, you know, using everything to your benefit. Like you're not really making a difference in your organization that you claim to be. So I just want to say, when you're looking at those things, make sure that you speak specifically about what you mean. If you're speaking about diversity, speak on that. If you're speaking about inclusivity, speak on that. And then, you know, and you should be speaking on these things, both of them. So, you know, make sure that you're across the board, diverse and inclusive.
I felt that.
Yeah, me too. Somebody said I wish it was a snap icon to use. I'll do it for you.
Oh my God.
Yes, yes.
So I've worked with diversity data, and I've done more so from the public perspective, not so much from an organization perspective. And some of the things I've done with my data visits that I've created, one highlights historically Black colleges and universities. I attended Tennessee State University, and recently I noticed that there were a lot of donors that were donating money to HBCUs, and they were going to like a handful, and I wanted to provide a resource that literally shows all the HBCUs that are available, so that anybody could come in and access. Create a similar business where I'm highlighting African-American therapists that are in Nashville, Black-owned restaurants, and then, you know, anything Black related. So Black doctors, Black dentists, Black physicians, you know, that's kind of my focal point, is to create something that's accessible, that anybody could come in and use Tableau Public for what it's for. You know, come in here, look at this stuff, quickly gain insights, and then take action on it. So that's kind of my drive when I'm doing anything from a public facing perspective. And then, you know, when it comes to diversity data, I think people should consider the message you're trying to send when you're working with this type of data, and then also think about the type of tone you're using, right? Are you only highlighting like the negative aspects of things, or are you using some of this diversity data to highlight positive aspects when you're creating some of this information?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like, and when I hear this, some of it goes back to Sekou, something you said earlier about painting a picture, right? You're telling a story, and what is a story that you're telling? And going back to Chantilly, what you said, like how much detail are you sharing about that story, right? How transparent are you being? So I think that is I think that's incredibly important. And you know, when you're thinking about that and thinking about ways to look at actually looking at the data and creating the data sets themselves and making sure that they're more inclusive and equitable, do you have any guidance or tips on how to think about that?
Yeah, I think understanding what areas can be impacted by these data sets will help answering that question of what data sets do I need to create. Right, we live in a data-driven world, and I think taking some time to understand the problem that we potentially solve with some of these valuable data sets is a big deal. Like just taking some time to be like, hey, what's out there? What's something that we can create with the data sets will go a long way. Right now, there's a lot of opportunity right now to use data to highlight, like I mentioned earlier, HBCUs, minority-owned business, minority leadership, minority doctors, just all these different elements out there that can be used with data. And I think there should be some more public data sets out there that highlight this information. One thing also, I think there should be some more minority-focused data set or tied into some of these weekly public challenges that we use in this community. And I think some of these data sets should be released outside of Black History Month. I think it should be a reoccurring thing that is not only released just in February, like it should be reoccurring.
If I had a tip, I would say that it would be to always check your bias. People oftentimes don't recognize the extent to which biases affect like our thinking and our action. And people look at bias as a negative thing, but you know, it's a natural phenomenon. It's something that our brain naturally does to form associations to help us understand the world and to actually like, you know, keep us safe, right? So if like say you know, you're walking down the street at night, you're going to be hyper vigilant because you know, whether verbally you've been told or you've heard from the media or any type of external stimuli, we know that, you know, things can happen in the night. You've heard of people getting robbed or attacked or whatever. But, you know, if you're walking down the street and you don't see anybody, you don't hear anything, and you just take off running, it kind of look crazy. Now you're just running down the street. But it's not an unfair or incorrect bias, but it's incorrect for that situation. So when you're looking at your data sets, you kind of actually have to challenge your mind to say, like, is there anything here that I'm kind of assuming, or that I'm kind of just, you know, making an unfair assumption or anything like that. So a lot of our biases, they're unconscious and they can just pop up like unintentionally in our data or in our actions or what have you. So I think that's something that I would say is just, you know, when you're creating your data sets or your vizzes or dashboards, you know, just look for any type of conscious fair or unfair bias, and make sure that, you know, it's not skewing anything. So that would be my tip.
Awesome. And I wanted to kind of, based on what you shared there, it kind of, I know we've all talked about this before, but I kind of want to go into this like kind of two-part question existing in two parts of my mind. So the first element is really around what are some good examples, right, of how data reframes difficult discussions, right, around race, gender, and intersectionality, right? There's like, we are all of these things. How can it kind of, in a good way, frame these? But then also, sometimes we see them misused in these conversations, right? Like there's two parts of the coin, sides of the coin. Yeah. Can we just spend a couple of minutes talking about that? I would love to get your perspectives. Chantilly, I don't know if you would want to kick it off, or
I can kick it off. And for the first part of this question, I want to give a shout out actually to a Tableau Public author and a friend of mine, Spencer Bokey. Spencer's Tableau Public profile contains a series of visualization that dive into specific diversity topics. And really what I love about Spencer's approach is that he's always asking for feedback and making sure that, you know, like Jasent said, his visualizations aren't incorporating any form of his own bias. So there are two visualizations that I want to highlight that Spencer created. His first visualization was on school segregation in America, right? And we think that this is such a dated topic, right? Like this is, the laws were passed years ago, but this is something that's still impacting us today. And in this visualization, Spencer was able to use like various maps and detailed charts and highlight that even though our nation continues to be more diverse, the amount of Black and white children that are actually going to school together has declined. Now, you know, that's something that most people wouldn't know without like looking at this visualization and diving into the details. Another visualization of his that I really like is the history of interracial marriage laws. And in this viz, you can see how over time, which states allowed interracial marriages and which did not, and you can learn more about those laws. And I thought it was a very impactful viz. So I would say like, those are just two, but a lot of authors within the Tableau public space are doing work to reframe these difficult discussions. Now, on the contrary, right, when we talk about ways that data is being misused, one that I'll call out is the media, and in particular Fox News, right? There was a visualization that I could vividly recall that was displayed by Fox News, and the visualization that they displayed was a chart that correlated to the stock market's performance with the aftermath deaths of George Floyd, Martin Luther King Jr., and Michael Brown. Now, needless to say, this was a very insensitive visualization. And this was also around the time, and we're still having Black Lives Matter protests, but this was around the time of the protests. And I just felt that this visualization just shouldn't have been portrayed. And the fact that it was a media company that was actually portraying this to thousands and hundreds and millions of Americans, right? I just thought that was just a very good description of a way that data can be misused.
Thank you, Chantilly.
Oh, okay. I wanted to just touch on something that I saw where I think the data was it wasn't misused, but it was misleading. There was a company, and it was a consulting firm, and they said, you know, we are above average in diversity. And they had their percentage above average, what percent above average they were, but they didn't say what the average was, right? So that's something. I mean, if on average your company only has 3 Black people and a woman, and then the next year you have 4 Black people and 2 women, and your company is 1,000 people, I mean, yes, you're increasing in diversity, but you're not above average. You're above your average, yes, but you're not truly a diverse company. And I think things like that are I'm not going to say they deliberately mislead people, but they're designed to make the company seem like something it's not. So I want to encourage people, like, if you're using data, make it clear what you're speaking about and what your company actually is doing. And and it's not a problem if your company, I mean, it is a problem, but it's something you need to work on, and being honest and saying, we only have this many people, but this is something we are working on. That's a better look than saying, we're above average and we're great in diversity when you're actually not.
Yep, absolutely. It goes out of that picture painting, right? What is
right, exactly.
And I'm sorry, Sekou, did I just interrupt you? I didn't.
Oh, no, quick follow-up. Yeah, like Chantilly said earlier, there's some stuff out here in the Tableau public community that is truly highlighting some of the disparities. There's some really good people that are doing some good stuff out there. And then alternatively, media and, other organizations are not using their code of ethics when it comes to data. They're creating a story and this narrative that is beneficial for them, but not beneficial for the whole. And that's just, you see examples of it all the time, and it's really can be exhausting if you let it get to you that way.
Absolutely. I think exhausting is a really kind of a good description. And just kind of in follow up to that, I was wondering, what DEI data should we pay attention to, and how should we pay attention to drive progress? So just kind of as a continuation on what we were just speaking about, do you have any kind of comments on that?
Yeah, so I'm coming from a public-facing perspective. So I believe we should pay attention to what opportunities are being created and what is being filled and who they're being filled with. What resources are being donated and where they're being donated to. I really believe COVID right now has forced people to slow down and pay attention to current events. And right now we're in a season where a lot of promises are being made with new initiatives and new things that are going on. And one of my fears is I believe that once COVID eventually goes away, that some of these promises will not be fulfilled. So I believe having diversity and inclusion data will help drive these new initiatives that are being created. And my passion is getting more people to look like me in data analytics. So I personally will be paying more attention to how these companies and organizations plan on filling these roles because it ties into what we're doing at Pivot Technology to try and get these jobs filled, trying to get people trained up into analytics and so on and so forth. So that's what I personally will be focusing on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I had one more question I wanted to go into, but before I move on, I just wanted to make sure, Jasent, Chantilly, is there anything you wanted to add?
I'm good on that one.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
we got
fine.
4 minutes left, so we could go to the next question.
Awesome, awesome. So I wanted to kind of move away from analytics just for this last couple of minutes and talk about ideas for creating inclusive, brave spaces in the workplace, creating a welcoming culture at work, in your neighborhood or your community. I know that's a pretty broad question, but as we kind of close out our conversation today, is there anything that that y'all can share about your perspectives on that?
I'll talk quickly. So I think the main thing is to be open and willing to have these difficult conversations, and they are difficult, and they will be uncomfortable, but they are also necessary. So, you know, if you have Black employees in your workspace or people of color, and you've seen all what's have been happening in the news, you mentioning it first gives them the opportunity to speak about it, and it lets them know that you're open and receptive to hearing about things that they are concerned about. So I think that, just being willing to, a lot of people say, well, this is not office talk, or don't bring that into the workplace. That's not inclusive, right? So, if you are dedicated to really being diverse and inclusive, then you need to be cognizant of the issues that affect your peers. And then I would also say listen when other people talk, right? So people reveal things about themselves, like whether purposefully or inadvertently, and you can use those things to make sure that the workspace, your environment is inclusive, and it's welcoming for people who might be different, or people who might not feel that they're generally welcomed here historically. So I think that's something.
Absolutely. And I would just want to reiterate what Kimberly mentioned earlier about, creating a safe space to fail, and how some of those failures aren't equal among groups, right? So one person failing from a non-minority group might just be, quick chat here, versus it having like severe impact on someone else from a different minority group. So I think organizations and individuals need to wholeheartedly think about creating spaces, safe spaces for failure, and learning from those failures.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I would say, honestly, just be yourself as well. Like, don't feel the need to dress up and wear dashiki and grow dreadlocks because you feel like we need to validate you, and you need validation that you're part of the movement. Like, if you're doing things the right way, like, we know that you're on our side and are helping out creating these safe spaces. Like, you don't have to, go that super above and beyond. But I would ask, in those moments when we're not around, for you to step up, for you to speak up and be like, hey, this isn't cool. Like, I don't appreciate that kind of talk. Like, be an ally when we're not around goes a very long way. So it's easy to do, when we're there, but when we're not around, that's really will help out.
I just want to put a big underline on that, right?
Absolutely.
When we think about, who's in the room, right? Who's in the room? Who's having the conversation? And I think that willingness to speak up is hugely important. So I just wanted to second that.
Absolutely.
And I know we're just about out of time. We're getting a lot of questions through from the audience. Hi, everybody. Thank you again. Around tips for finding mentors. And I know we talked about this a little bit already, but if any one of you can chime in, like if there's one thing that folks walk away with as like a think about this around finding a mentor, like what would you say?
I'll touch on that to start. I have a lot of individuals who reach out to me to mentor them. And I think the best mentor relationships are the ones that are give and take, not the ones that are just take, right? When it comes to Sekou and Jasent, I truly enjoy our relationships because I feel as though they're mentoring me as well. Like they're teaching me things, and in turn, they say that I'm teaching them things as well. So I think those are the best relationships. And when you are seeking out a mentor, think about that as well. So that'd be my main point.
Awesome. Thank you, Chantilly.
I would say when approaching someone, because it can be very difficult and you don't just want to like walk up to someone, can you please be my mentor, or you know, something like that. Like I think when you approach it from a standpoint of I'm trying to do X and I have seen you do X, or do you have any insight into X, I think that's a better approach. And it shows that you are doing the work, you are willing to do the work, and you're trying to get assistance in that. And someone coming and looking at you will say like, you know, oh wow, I can really help you do this, because people, you know, people are helpful, they want to be helpful. But you know, if you just say, here I am, mentor me, that's kind of just I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, so I think having a planned approach, and you know, having, and not to say like, you know, if you have some goals or some plans, or you might not have a direction yet, that's okay. But like, you know, at least have an idea of what you want to do and where you want to head, and what you want from the person that you're reaching out to.
Absolutely.
And I was gonna say I agree with all that. You know, definitely have some course of action and like what you hope to gain out of it. Don't just come in there empty-handed. Just be like, hey, I want this out of this relationship, and then realize it's a two-way street as well. Because mentors are probably busy themselves. So you know, understanding, be cognizant of the time when you're asking for mentorship. Also, make sure you're bringing something to it.
Awesome. Thank you. I genuinely wish that I had been able to hear these words and been a part of this conversation a long time ago. I feel like it would have helped me navigate some things. So I really appreciate that. I know that we are at time. Chantilly, Sekou, Jasent, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and your feedback. And then of course, a big thank you to Kimberly Bryant for joining us today. And all of you in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. And we will be having a similar event coming up at Tableau Conference-ish 20. So please watch out for more coming from us soon. And again, thank you all. Team, that's right, we're a team now. Chantilly, Sekou, Jasent, is there anything else that you wanted to share as we close up, or?
I'm good on my end. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm good. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope very much to be talking with you all again very soon. And thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.